Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Agudath Israel Etz Ahayem Synagogue here in Montgomery, Alabama. I am Rabbi Scott Kramer. Welcome to our Kabbalat Shabbat service. Welcome to our Chazan, Charles Barron. And I see my daughter Adina is with us. And Betty Ziri is also here, and I'm sure others will be in a moment. We are praying out of Sidor Lev Shalem, and we'll begin tonight's service. And there comes the hearts early. Good, I love that. We will begin with Shalom Aleichem on page 5. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Also, good evening to Emily and Jack and Michelle. We continue with Lechuna Ranana, page 11. Lechune Ranana, Lechune Ranana, Lechune Ranana Ladunai, Lechune Ranana, Lechune Ranana, Lechune Ranana Ladunai. Nariya, Nariya, Letzur Yishenu, Nekad Mafana Betoda. Nariya, Nariya, Letzur Yishenu, Bizmirot Nariya Lo. Lechune Ranena, Lechune Ranena, Lechune Ranena Ladunai. Lechune Ranena, Lechune Ranena, Lechune Ranena Ladunai. Nariya, Nariya, Letzur Yishenu, Nekad Mafana Betoda. Nariya, Nariya, Letzur Yishenu, Bizmirot Nariya Lo. We continue in the English. Let us go and sing to Adonai. Let us trumpet praise to our protector. Filled with thanks, let us greet God, raising our voice in song. Great is Adonai, a greater sovereign than all other deities. God's hands formed the earth's deep. Mountain crests too are God's work. The sea is God's, for God made it. Dry land was fashioned by God's hands. Come then, let us bow and kneel. Let us bend our knees in the presence of Adonai who formed us. For Adonai is our God, and we are God's flock, sheep in God's caring hands. If only you would listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted like the people at Merivah, like the time at Massah in the desert, when your ancestors tried me and tested me, though they had seen what I had wrought. For 40 years I was troubled by that generation, and I said, these are a people whose hearts have gone astray. They do not know my ways, so in anger I swore they would not enter my rest. Arbaim shanakut bedor, v'omaram toeh levavhem v'hem lo yadid rachai, asher nishmati v'yapi, im yavaun el menuchati. Page 13, Psalm 96. Ashiru ladonai shir chadash, shiru ladonai kol haaretz, shiru ladonai baruchu shemo, Basru miyom leyom Yeshuato, Sapru vagoyim kivodo, Bechol amim nifliotov, Ki gadol Adonai, O mehulal miyob, No rahu, Alko Elohim, lai lai lai, Kiko Elohe, ha'amim melilim, V'Adonai shamayim asa, Hod v'hadar lefanav, Hoz v'tiferet b'mikdasho, Havu l'Adonai mishpachot hamim, Havu l'Adonai kavod v'oz, Havu l'Adonai ke'evod shemo, Seu mincha, Ovo lechatzerod, havlai lai lai, shtachavu l'Adonai, behadrat kodesh, chilu mipanav kol haaretz, imrum vagoyim, Adonai malach, avtikum tevel balatimot, yadinamim b'meisharim, yismechu hashamayim v'tagil haaretz, hayiram mayamu, Melo Yalo Sadai Vechol Asher Bo Lai 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 Aziranenu Kolat Seyar Lifnei Adonai Kiva Lishpot Aretz Ishpot Tevel Betzedek V'yamnim Bemu Nato Yalai Lai 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 Yalai Lai 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 Yai lai lai lai, ya lai 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 lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai lai. We continue on page 15 with Psalm 97. Adonai reigns, let the earth be glad, the many distant lands rejoice. Clouds and thick darkness surround the divine. Righteousness and justice secure God's throne. Fire goes before God, consuming besiegers round about. Flashes of lightning illumine the land. The earth watches and trembles. Mountains melt like wax at the approach of Adonai, at the approach of the Master of all the earth. The heavens tell of God's righteousness, and all the nations see God's glory. Worshippers of idols be shamed for praising false gods. All that is deemed supreme bow low before God. Zion hears of it and rejoices. The cities of Judah exult as you, Adonai, pass judgment. You, Adonai, are above all that is earthly, exalted over all that is worshipped as divine. Those who love Adonai hate evil. God protects the lives of the faithful, saving them from the hands of the sinful. Light is sown for the righteous and joy for the upright. Rejoice in Adonai, you righteous people, and thank God as you pronounce the divine holy name. Or zaru la tzadik v'Yisrael ev simcha, simchu tzadikim b'Adonai, v'hodu lezecher kadesho. Page 17, Psalm 98. Amizmor shiru ladonai shir chadash, ki niflaot asa hoshia lo yemino, ozaro wahako ochuadia Adonai Yeshuato, le'eno goyim gilad tzidkato, Zachar chesed ve'emunato, leveit Yisrael, ra'u cholav se'aretz, et Yeshuat Eloheinu, horiu l'Adonai kol haaretz, bitzchum ve'ranenu v'zameru, zamru l'Adonai bechinor, bechinor ve'kol zimara, mechatzot rod ve'kol shofar, horiu lifnei hamelech Adonai, yamayamu below, tevel v'yosh ve'va, neharot yimcha uchaf, Yachad arim yiranenu, lifnei Adonai kiva, lishbot haaretz, lishbot tevel b'tzedek, Ve'amim b'meisharim. Yalai, yalai, la 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 la. Yalai, la 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 la. Yalai, la 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 la. Yalai, la 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 la. Yalai, la 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 la. Yalai, la 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 la. Yalai, la 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 la. Yalai, la 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 la. And now we are on page 19 with Psalm 99. Adonai reigns, nations tremble. The one enthroned amidst the cherubim makes the world quake. Adonai is great in Zion above all nations. They shall acknowledge your name, saying, Great, all-inspiring, Holy One. A sovereign strength lies in the love of justice, and you forge the paths of truth, judging Jacob righteously and justly. Exalt Adonai our God, bow down before God the Holy One. Moses and Aaron among God's priests, and Samuel among those who called upon the divine name, called to you and you answered them. You spoke to them from amidst the cloud. They kept your covenant and the law you gave them. You answered them, Adonai our God. You are a forgiving God to them, even as you punish them for their transgressions. Exalt Adonai our God and bow down at God's holy mountain, for Adonai our God is holy. Romemu Adonai Elohim v'ishtachavu la'ar kadisho ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. We rise, if you are able, page 21, Psalm 29. Mizmor leDavid, havu ladonai b'nei elim, havu ladonai kavod vos, havu ladonai kavod shemo, ishtachavu ladonai be'adat kodesh, kol Adonai al hamayim, Ela kavod hirim Adonai al mayim rabim, kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shover arazim, Vaishaber Adonai et al zehalvanon, Vayarkidem kemo egel, Lebanon v'Sirion kemo vendrehemim, Kol Adonai chotzev lavotesh, Kol Adonai yachil midbar, Yachil Adonai midbar kadesh, Kol Adonai yecholeo ayalot, vayechesop yaharod, uvehechalo kulo omer kavod, Adonai lamabul yashav, yeshev Adonai melech leolam, Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. You may be seated. We continue with Lechadodi, page 23. Lechadodi lekrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabela. Lechadodi lekrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. Hishmiyanu elam yuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad, l'shemo tiferet v'litila lecha, dodi likrat kala, p'nei Shabbat nikabila, likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor abiracha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sov maaseh b'machshvat chila lecha, dodi likrat Kala p'nei Shabbat nikabila, mikdash melech ir melucha, kumitzi mitocha haficha, ravlach shevet b'yemek abacha, v'uyachamo alayich imla, lecha dodi likrat kala, p'nei Shabbat nikabila, hitnaharim me'afar kumi, Leave Shevik de Tifartecha mi ayad ben Yishai Beitalach mi karva em nafshi geyala lecha dodi likrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabila hitoreri Kiva ore kumi ori shir da beri kivod Adonai alayich nigla lecha dodi likrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabila lecha dodi likrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabila lo tevoshi v'lo tikami matish tochachi umatem nibach yachasu ani yamni v'nivneta ir altila lecha dodi likrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabila v'hayulam shisa Shahawasayich v'irachakuko mihivalayich yasisalayich Elohayich kimchas chatana halkala lechadodi lehikrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabila yaminu smoti v'otzi v'yet Adonai taritzi ayadish Ben parti v'nismecha v'nagila lecha dodi likrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabila. We rise for the last stanza of Lecha Dodi, page 25. We face towards the entrance, we face towards the west to greet the Shabbat bride. Boi v'shalom materet bala gam besimcha uvitzala toch emunei am segula boi chala lecha dodi likrat kala p'nei Shabbat nikabila. You may be seated. Continue page 27. Psalm 92. A psalm, the song of the day of Shabbat. It is good to thank you, Adonai, and to sing your name most high, to proclaim your love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night. Finger the lute, pluck the harp, let the sound of the lyre rise up. You gladden me with your deeds, Adonai, and I shall sing of your handiwork. How wonderful are your works, Adonai, how subtle your designs. The arrogant do not understand, the fool does not comprehend this. The wicked flourish like grass, and every evildoer blossoms, only to be destroyed forever. But you, Adonai, are exalted for all time. Surely your enemies, Adonai, surely your enemies will perish. All who commit evil will be scattered. As a wild bull raises up its horn, you raised my head high, anointed it with fresh oil. As my enemies gather against me, my gaze remains steady, for my ears listen and hear. The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of Adonai, they flourish in our God's courtyards. In old age they remain fruitful, still fresh and bountiful, proclaiming Adonai is upright, my rock in whom there is no flaw. Tzadika tamar yifrach ki erez balvanon yiske shetulim bevet Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvun beseva deshenim v'hananim yeyu lehagid ki yashar Adonai tzuri Fellow of Latabo, page 29, Psalm 93. Adonai is sovereign, robed in splendor, girded in strength. The earth stands firm, not to be dislodged. From earliest time you are enthroned, you are eternal. The rivers rise up, Adonai, the rivers raise up their roar. The rivers raise up their waves. Above the roar of the vast sea and the majestic breakers of the ocean, Adonai stands supreme in the heavens. In your house, beautiful in its holiness, your testimonies endure, Adonai, for all time. Once again, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to everyone. I hope all of you have had a good week and looking forward to a restful Shabbat. I know I am. This really was a tough week. And the toughness began last Saturday night after our statewide Havdalah service. I received a phone call from Carol Herzl, who informed me of her father, Max Herzl's death. Max Herzl, Menachem Mendel ben Yechezkel, was a dear, close friend from soon after I arrived in Montgomery as the rabbi of Agudath Israel, Etz Ahayem Synagogue. It was at the time of the bat mitzvah of Rachel Blondheim in 2008. Max Herzl was a Holocaust survivor, and as all Holocaust survivors, had a fascinating and troubling story to tell. He was born on May 3rd, 1930 in Antwerp, Belgium, making him 91 Kenahara when he died last Friday. His journey from Belgium to France was a harrowing one as he and his family stayed one step ahead of the Nazis of Vichy, France. Eventually, Max wound up in a convent where the nuns protected him, pretending to be Catholic, until his eventual freedom and immigration to the United States, where he was reunited with his mother and brother. Max's father and most of the rest of the family were murdered in the Holocaust. Carol, his daughter, told me at the funeral last Sunday, that Max had finally tracked down where exactly his father had died. And he only found out a couple weeks before his death. Max served the United States military during the Korean War and made a career as a hospital administrator in Birmingham, where he met his wife, Cecile, and had 2 children. He spoke as many as 50 times per year to groups about his experience in Europe during the war, and was a regular panel member of the AUM Holocaust Education Program founded by our own Sheila Guidry. I served with him as a board member of the Alabama Holocaust Commission. The reason I met him for the first time at the bat mitzvah of Rachel Blondheim was that Rachel was sharing her special day with a girl that never had a chance to have a bat mitzvah. Jenny Rachel Solomon, daughter of Rabbi Shimon and Esther Solomon, was 14 years old on October 7th, 1943, when she was deported on convoy number 60 and was sent to Auschwitz. She was called Giddy and was Max Herzl's cousin. Max was about the same age as Giddy. On June 14th, 2008, Giddy finally had her bat mitzvah along with Rachel Blondheim. Max and Cecile have been close friends ever since that bat mitzvah. Max was articulate, smart, and very educated about the Holocaust and the history of that era. I learned more than I ever knew about Vichy France and Philippe Pétain, the French general and hero of the Battle of Verdun of World War I, and then discredited as chief of state of the French government at Vichy in World War II. I attended Max's funeral last Sunday in Birmingham. There were no other survivors in attendance. You see, we are almost at the end of this era where you can talk with survivors and hear their story. This past year, we lost Max Steinmetz, a Holocaust survivor of Auschwitz, who spoke at the AUM Holocaust Education Program along with Max Herzl for many, many years. I met Max Steinmetz's son, Steve, at the funeral and told him how sad I was for his and our loss. The important thing about the AUM education program and that panel discussion that Max Steinmetz and Max Herzl spoke at year after year is that high schoolers from all over the south of Alabama, from Montgomery through Mobile to the panhandle of Florida, high schoolers packed the auditorium, the gymnasium of AUM, and were able to ask questions and interact with both Maxes. Not only were they able to ask questions in public, but they got to take their pictures with them. And unfortunately, we will never have that experience again with either of them. Max Herzl told me once that he feared what would happen when the last survivor dies. As long as survivors are around, we can talk to them and they can detail what the Holocaust was like and how horrific it was. When they are all gone, Max feared that they would be replaced with Holocaust deniers, since no one alive will be able to refute them. That is why it is important to hold on to these memories, recordings, and writings of Holocaust survivors and tell them to the next generation. Our children and grandchildren need to know what happened so we can truly declare never again. May God comfort all of you and all who have mourned for Zion and Jerusalem. Shabbat Shalom. We will continue with Ma'ariv. Ask everyone, if you are able, to please stand. Page 39a for the Baruch Hu, the call to worship. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Vo'ed. You may be seated. Baruch atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, whose word brings the evening dusk, whose wisdom opens the gates of dawn, whose understanding changes the day's division, whose will sets the succession of seasons and arranges the stars in their places in the sky, who creates day and night, who rolls light before darkness and darkness from light, who makes day pass into night, who distinguishes day from night. Adonai Tzavaot is your name, living and ever-present God. May your rule be with us forever and ever. Baruch atah Adonai, who brings each evening's dusk. Umahavir yom umevi laila, mavdil ben yom uvein laila Adonai Tzavaot shemo. El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu lamvohed Baruch atah Adonai. Hamariv haravim, page 40. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael amchavta Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadta al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shachvenu v'kumeinu nasiach bechukecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד, כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובאו הם נגה יומם ולילה, תיבתך תשים ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol miodecha. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשכבך וקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם נמזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, והיה אם שמוע תשמעו אל מצוותי. Vayomer Adonai Moshe lemor daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta lehem v'yasu lehem tzitzit al kanfei v'gdehem ledoratam v'natnu al tzitzit akana petil techelet v'haya lachem letzitzit oritem oto uschartem et kol mitzvot Adonai v'asitem otam ולא תטו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני Elohechem Emet, page 43a. This is our enduring affirmation, binding on us that Adonai is our God and there is none other, and we, Israel, are God's people. God is our sovereign, redeeming us from earthly rulers, delivering us from the hand of all tyrants, bringing judgment upon our oppressors and just retribution upon all our mortal enemies. performing wonders beyond understanding and marvels beyond all reckoning. God places us among the living, not allowing our steps to falter, and leads us past the false altars of our enemies, exalting us above all those who hate us. Adonai avenged us with miracles before Pharaoh offered signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. God brought Israel from its midst to lasting freedom and led them through the divided water of the Sea of Reeds. As their pursuers and enemies drowned in the depths, God's children beheld the power of the divine. They praised and acknowledged God's name. Page 44. ומלכות הברצון קיבל עליהם משה ובני ישראל הנשירה בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך פועלים אדוני מי כמוך נדור בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אלה מלכותך ראובנך בוקיים לפני משה זה לי ענו ויאמרו Adonai yimloch leolam voed v'nehemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov v'galad midachazak mimenu baruch et Adonai ga'al Yisrael. Page 45. Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Leshalom Ve'hamidenu Malkeinu Lechaim Ufaros Aleinu Sukat Shalomecha V'taknenu b'yetzatova milfanecha Ve'hoshienu leman shemecha. Ushmotzeitenu ein l'chaim u'shalom yata v'yad olam u'fosanenu sukat shlomecha baruch et Adonai haboret sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim. We rise, if you are able, for Vishamru, page 46. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'dor tambarim brit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'doratam barit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam oti le'olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'doratam barit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'doratam barit olam. V'yom hashvi shavat v'yinofash shavat v'yinafash v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'doratam barit olam. We rise for the silent Amidah for Friday night, pages 47 through page 52. This is our time to pray to God in Hebrew, in English, or the best language of all, the language of the heart. Shalom Rav Yisroel Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisroel Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisroel Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisroel Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov be'einecha levarech et Amecha Yisrael bechol eit uvechol sha'a bishlomecha. Shalom Rav Yisroel Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisroel Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. We rise as the ark is open for Aleinu, page 56. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol latet gdula liotze breshit shelo asan kagoye haratzot v'lo samanu kamishmachot adama shelo sam chelkenu kahem v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam v'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu Notei Shamayim v'Yosed Haaretz, u'Moshe v'Yikara b'Shamayim nimau, u'Shchinatu zo, b'Gavei meromim, u'Eloheinu Einod, Emed Malkeinu Evazulato, Kakatu b'Torato, V'yadata hayom v'hashivota elevavecha ki Adonai hu Elohim b'shamayim nimal v'yal haaretz mitachat einod al ken nikav lecha Adonai Eloheinu lirot meher b'tifechet uzecha Lavi galuli min haaretz ha'elilim karat yikaretun letakin olam b'malchut Shaddai v'chol b'nei vasik yiru v'shmecha lahafnan elecha korishe haaretz yakiru v'yedu kol yoshvei tevel ki lecha tichra kol berech tishava kol lashon lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu yichru b'polu v'lichvod shimcha yikayivteinu v'kablu chulam et ol machutecha v'timloch aleihem meher olam v'hed ki yom hachot shelcha hi olamei ad timloch bechavod kakatu b'toretecha Adonai yimloch le'olam v'hed v'ne'emar k'v'haya Adonai l'melech al haaretz bayom mahu yiyeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. You may be seated. This week we will observe yard sites for David Capilouto, Phyllis Franco, Molly Hirschman, Hilliard Aronoff, William Lubell, Michael Isaac Israel, Solomon N. Varon, Dr. Irving London, Dora Bell, Bernice Klein, Mayor Rich, Eve Back, Rachel Hilda Berg, Sarah Rosenberg Cohen, Eugene Feldman, and Ray Worth. With every yard site notice we send out, I ask that you consider sending in a few paragraphs, a couple paragraphs of remembrance for your loved one. I received this one from Joy Blondheim for her father, Hilliard Aronoff. My father died 50 years ago, and yet I still miss him every day. My daddy, Hilly, loved his synagogue, his community, and the people in it so much. He worked for both the synagogue and the Montgomery community tirelessly, and I learned from his example about how to be an active and dedicated member of my synagogue and my community. But as much as he loved these things, it was his family he loved the most. He and his brothers had a unique and loving connection. They were connected in business, they were connected socially, and certainly the entire extended family had a closeness that many people only dream of. I miss all of them. Thank you, Joy. Those observing yard site and those who mourn, please rise. Join me for the Kaddish Tome, the Mourner's Kaddish, page 58. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shmei Rabbah, Bialma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'galav izman kariv yimaru amen, Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olmei maya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitchomam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei d'kudisha barichu, le'lam min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran bi'alma v'yimaru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimaru amen. Oseh shalom b'imramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimaru amen. You may be seated. Again, thank you all for joining me, for joining us for Kabbalat Shabbat, the beginning of Shabbat tonight. I will be back tomorrow morning to continue Shabbat services at 9:30 a.m. And tomorrow evening, via Zoom, we will meet for the Alabama Community Virtual Havdalah. We have a couple guests. We have guests every week. 2 weeks ago, for those that were there, we were treated to a wonderful Hamilton parody by student cantor Carl Sayers from Seattle. He is actually coming back tomorrow night, and he's going to be singing a Saul Zim song, Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, and it is absolutely a beautiful, beautiful song. And so I hope you're able to join us tomorrow night as we close Shabbat with Havdalah on Zoom. If you did not get the link, please email me, rabbi@agudathmontgomery.com, and I will send you the link. Otherwise, I hope to see all of you there. Sunday morning, please set your alarm clocks for 2 a.m. Get up, turn your alarm off, and set your clocks back to 1 a.m. and then go back to bed. We change our times this week, so next week Shabbat is going to start really early. And also, if you have any appointments on Sunday, unless you remember about the clocks, you're going to get to your appointments an hour early. So please do that. A week from tomorrow, November 13th, can't believe we're into the middle of November yet. November 13th, we are very excited for the bar mitzvah of Aaron Aronoff, the son of Lori and Owen Aronoff. It will be family only in the sanctuary, but you may enjoy the bar mitzvah. We're sitting right where you are, and I hope, I'm really looking forward to this. We haven't had a bar mitzvah since June, and we won't have another one for another year when we celebrate the bar mitzvah of the Hagler kids next November or December, I can't remember. But please join us a week from Saturday on our website, on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, and enjoy the bar mitzvah of Aaron Aronoff. We'll conclude our service with Adon Olam on page 211. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'ed nasa v'chefso kol azai melech shemo nikra azai melech shemo nikra v'yachare kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה והוא יהיה בתפארה והוא אחד ואין שני לעם שלא להכבירה בלי ראשית בלי תכלית ולא העוז והמשרה ולא העוז והמשרה והוא אלי וחי גואלי וצור חבלי ביצרה והוא ניסי ומנוס לי מנת כוסי ביום מקרא מנת כוסי ביום מקרא בידו אפקיד רוחי בעת אישן ויעירה ואם רוחי גוויעתי אדוני לי ולא אירא אדוני לי Velo ira. Shabbat shalom. Have a great evening. And there are the hearts.